Jai Prabhuji. Hello and welcome to our course where we are exploring the book of Prabhuji, Kundalini Yoga, The Power is in You. This is the book, and as usual, I would like to recommend whoever doesn't have it to get it. For the ones that are following the course since the beginning, you probably notice how we are many times taking from certain topic in the book just a small sentence or a small paragraph, and from there we are developing a whole class. So it's very important to have the book as a support for what we're learning during this course. Also, I wanted to mention that this is our class number 19. So we've been covering many basic and relevant terms, concepts that are important in order for us to familiarize ourselves and to understand more in regards of this beautiful path of the Kundalini Yoga. So you probably notice how many times we're also in each class taking concepts and terms that we learned in depth in their own class, but we're taking it in classes that we are giving right now. So for this, I always recommend, besides having the book, to go to the previous classes where we are explaining different terms, and I am actually, every time I mention a term that had its own class in the past, I'm actually saying it in case the person wants to deepen their understanding on certain terms that, as I mentioned, these are a foundation. So to whoever it's actually following the order of the course, you probably notice how it's easier to understand when we're bringing one of the examples of these terms that we already learned. So today we are starting the exploration, the inquiry in regards to the third center in this system of chakras. This is the Maṇipūra-cakra, or the solar plexus chakra. We are going to notice how from the beginning we saw the first section of the book, and we learned different terms, different concepts, the nadis, what is prana. We learn very basic things also about the chakras. We learn about the grantis. We learn about the marmas. We learn about the Devi and the difference between Kundalini Shakti and Prana Shakti. We learn many other topics, and now we are kind of in this second stage where we are deepening more our understanding in regards to the centers, which is mainly it's one of the most important parts in the path of the Kundalini Yoga. And something that I would like to mention today was said in our introductory class, where we were trying to, like, if we had to have a purpose or an objective for the course, more than just accumulating certain information, was for us to realize the things that we are saying here. So because now in this stage we're also sharing different techniques in order to open the chakras, and in the past when we speak about the ascent, the awakening, the ascent and the descent of the Kundalini, we also share very similar things where we spoke about sadhana and doing things. But at the same time, I want us to just remember what is the real reason why we study these different subjects. This is a path to self-realization, and I remember Prabhuji even speaking about his practice and how it helped in his development. Also, it's good to mention, as usual, that enlightenment, the realization of ourselves, is not something that we can do, but it's something that is revealed. The divine reveals itself because he wants, and it's not something that we can manipulate. So with everything that we learn, with everything that we practice, Brahma Vidya, Yoga Vidya that we mentioned it in the past, it's always because we want to prepare the conditions in order to receive something from the divine, and it's not something that we can actually manipulate. So let's begin with our topic of the class, which is the Maṇipūra-cakra. As I mentioned, this is the third center, and I would like us to begin by reading a verse that we find in this book that I mentioned in the past, the Chakra Nirupana. And it's going right away, as soon as we read it, it's going to right away give us a wider picture of what is this Maṇipūra-cakra about. Above it, Swadhisthana chakra, at the root of the navel, in the shining lotus of 10 petals, which is the color of clouds filled with water. Within it are the letters Da, Tu, Pa, of the color of the blue lotus, with the Nada and Bindu above them. Meditate on this region of red fire, triangular in form and shining like the rising sun. Outside it, there are 3 swastika marks, and within the Bija of Bani, fire itself. We find this verse in the Sat Chakra Nirupana by Swami Purnanananda. This is the number 19. So Manipura is a Sanskrit word that means the city of jewels. This is how we translate Manipura. Mani can be translated as shining jewel, and then Pura is city. So this is where we find the city of jewels. Other names that we can use to refer to this center are solar plexus chakra, as we heard it at the beginning of the class, which is associated with the region where the center is located. And another one is lustrous gem. So you see, it's like very, I would say, sophisticated terms to refer to the center. This lustrous gem, it's going to be related also to the meaning of this word in Sanskrit. So this city of jewels, it's going to come and suggests the different attributes that are associated with the center: our willpower, our self-esteem, the power to be controlled and be controlled, and also our ability to accomplish the things that we set out to do. Now I would like us to explore the Yantra of this center, as we've been doing with all the other centers. This is basically how we are starting our class, by familiarizing ourselves with the Yantra. So I am going to start sharing different images that represent the Yantra of the Manipura. The diagram of this chakra has 10 petals, which are symbolizing the 10 pranas, or the vital forces. As I was speaking at the beginning, here we see that we had our class about the pranas, and we went in depth in all of them. So today we can just mention them so we can refresh our memory for the ones that did see this class. For the ones that didn't, then please, you can go ahead and see this class about the prana. The 5 major types, pancha pranas, are prana, apana, samana, udana, and vyana. And then we have 5 minor ones, which are the panchopapranas. These ones are Naga, Kurma, Krikara, Devadatta, and Dhananyaya. Then continue with the mandala. This one has a triangle in its center, which is fire red. The Sanskrit letters of the petals are Dam, Dham, Nam, Tam, Tham, dham, dham, nam, pam, and pam. The bija that is vibrating in the heart, in the center of this Maṇipūra-cakra is Ram. As this is the third center, its correct functioning will be related to the balance in the previous one, as we learned in our classes, the Muladhara, which is related to the capacity of survival, the protection, and the sensation of feeling safe. And we saw that in the Swadhisthana, we find this constant search for pleasure, but when the center functions correctly, we enjoy from the enthusiasm and the creativity that we need in order to live. So then when we add to this equation an open third chakra, we find the willpower not to fall into the temptations of pleasure that we find in the Swadhisthana, which we saw that it's mainly, it's one of the more present attributes of this center. So we find in the third center, we find this willpower in order not to fall in these temptations, and we become the leaders of our lives, and not like we find this famous expression of going with the flow or going with the current. And here I would like to bring what we find in the book Advaita Vedanta, being the self, in regards to this of the current. It says, consciousness is an asset shared by humans and animals. However, only Homo sapiens has self-consciousness and the ability to choose. Unlike animals, we can change ourselves and adapt the world to our own choices. Animals are like leaves that flow down the river, carried by the current. Human beings are like motorboats that can steer in different directions, even against the current. And I brought this specific verse, this specific paragraph that we find in this book, because I had the blessing to listen to it in different darshans directly from Prabhuji, and he's always pointing out that this is different, about this gift and privilege that we have as human beings, where we can actually have this motor and steer this boat in our direction. And I like us to always mention how we're speaking now about willpower in the subtitle of the book, The Power is in You. He's speaking very much about this specific center, and we are going to continue understanding more about the power as we continue with this class. People with an open Manipura are considered to have high self-esteem. However, when there is certain blockage in this chakra, we do not feel adequate, we develop different complexes, and we can go through life even feeling ashamed of ourselves. Like, this is the power that is stored in this third center. An open umbilical center is going to give us this strength to fight for our goals, the ones that we set for ourselves, and we stop being victims of circumstances, and we develop enough maturity to lead us in life as we aspire. At the same time, we have the needed discrimination to decide what we want to do in life, why, and what we have to do in order to get these things that we want. So here we find the what, why, and how I can do it. We have these three stages on how we want to lead ourselves and how we aspire to live. this third chakra is closely related, as we've been seeing, with power and control. And with the previous centers, we saw that there can be either a balance or an imbalance in its functioning. So it's the same situation here. When we're tapping into this control that we exercise, that it's exercised in us, or the control that we have over others. So if we often feel that we do not have the control over our lives, we are constantly blaming others for what happens to us, it is very possible that our solar plexus center is blocked. This can be a symptom of a blocked Manipura. But if we feel powerful, invincible, and even we sometimes abuse our power to manipulate others to get the things that we want, then this can be a symptom of an overloaded Manipura. So here we're just mentioning two extremes, two directions. And these qualities of this third center, when it's working in excess, are given to people that are suffering from the narcissistic disorder, this personality disorder. So briefly, I know that this specific disorder, it's very common. I think people know more about this one in specific that others that we mentioned in the past, and that we're going to keep mentioning according to the centers. But I just anyways briefly want to mention it so we have a better understanding of where we're going and how these qualities are very related to this disorder. So according to the DSM-5, in this abbreviation, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the narcissistic personality disorder is defined as this general pattern of grandiosity. There is need for admiration, and there is a lack of empathy. This disorder is going to begin in the early adulthood and presents in a different variety of contexts. Some of their most common symptoms of this disorder are going to include an exaggerated belief in one's own importance and talent. There's going to be an exaggerated sense of entitlement and expectations that I need an special treatment. There is also going to be a constant need for admiration and attention. There is a lack of empathy for the feelings and needs of the other. So as we can see with the ones that I just mentioned, it's only me. I am the most important, and I even, besides the fact that I am the most important, I also lack empathy for others. It's not that the others are also important, but only my feelings matter, my needs, and I need to receive constant admiration, constant attention. I also have this exaggerated entitlement and expectations of receiving a very special treatment because I am so valuable and I am so important. So, of course, I need to receive a special treatment. Other symptoms are a tendency to exploit others for personal gain. So you see here this specific symptom of this disorder, how it's so connected to what we just mentioned in regards to the power that we exert in others in this third center. There is also an arrogant and an overbearing attitude. There are fantasies of power, success, of beauty, and also of idealized love. And there are also feelings of envy towards others and belief that others envy them, whoever is suffering from this disorder. There is a tendency to be superficial and very preoccupied with the physical appearance. It is important to note that having one or two of these symptoms does not necessarily mean that a person has a narcissistic personality disorder. A diagnosis for this disorder requires a thorough evaluation by a trained mental health professional. I always like to point out, and I won't get tired of mentioning how important is for everything that we're learning the guidance of a trained professional in the field that we're speaking. When we're speaking now about psychology, about a psychological disorder, then a mental health professional is the one that needs to give this diagnosis. When we're speaking in regards to the different symptoms of the opening, the awakening of the Kundalini, then we need to find an enlightened being, a master that can guide us with what's happening, but we always need the guidance of a professional in the field that we would like to cover. Also, I just wanted to mention before continuing with the topic that I think that with this specific disorder, we use it so casual, like, oh yeah, this person is a narcissistic. But as we saw, even though just by the fact that I mentioned, we can even find some of these symptoms in ourselves at certain times, certain periods, more they are expressing itself more than the others. And now that we're learning all these imbalances, in regards to this center and to the different centers, we can understand that maybe there is an imbalance. So this is how we want to digest and receive everything that we're sharing, to check ourselves, not so much others. Maybe we just had a picture of someone with the symptoms of my mother, my father, my sisters, but we actually want to see what we can find in ourselves and understand if there is certain imbalances in the centers that we are learning about. So to continue, in the book itself, we find the following sentences referring to power and surrender. Let us read. It is far better to put all power in the service of God and humanity, which is God's manifestation. Strive not to gain power, but renounce all possessions for God. True power lies in our complete surrender to the supreme power. Beautiful sentences. So once again, we are facing the subject of renunciation, and now we are adding surrender. We also saw it when we inquired about the knots or the granties, where the opening of these are a sign of spiritual evolution, and it's going to be directly related to our renunciation and surrender. And this is quoting the exact words that we found in the books. It's going to be directly related to our renunciation and to our surrender. So we see how renunciation and surrender, it's very connected. We already had our classes in the Swadhisthana chakra where we deepen in the topic of the renunciation, and today we are going to deepen into the topic of the surrender. Surrender is a very frequent subject in the retroprogressive path. We're going to find it in Prabhuji's lectures and in his books. Surrender is essential in the master-disciple relationship and in our path towards the realization of who we really are. So the last sentence that we just read tells us, and I would like to read it again, true power lies in our complete surrender to the supreme power. True power lies in our complete surrender to the supreme power. So complete surrender to the supreme power. But what is the meaning of this surrender? Can we actually, do we know what is the meaning of this surrender that we're speaking about here? So in the book Bhakti Yoga, The Path of Love, in the chapter 5, we have the 9 limbs of Bhakti Yoga. And the last limb is Atma Nivedana, or to surrender completely to the Lord. So I would like to mention the 9 limbs. Let's read them. The first one is Shravana, to listen to the holy pastimes, lilas of the Lord. Kirtana, to chant the sacred glories of the Lord. Smarana, to constantly remember the names of the Lord and His presence in our lives. Pada Sevana, to worship the sacred feet of the Lord. Archana, to worship through ceremonies and rituals. Vandana, to prostrate, do acts of reverence and pray to the Lord. Dasya, to cultivate an attitude of service toward the Lord. Sakya, to cultivate friendship with the Lord. Atma Nivedana, to surrender completely to the Lord. So I wanted us to read all the limbs, the 9 limbs, because although for our class it's not necessary to explain all of them, for me it is important to present that we are taking the last stage of a process that gives us this path of Bhakti Yoga for the realization of the self. Actually, the Bhakti Yoga, it's also called the Yoga of the 9 limbs, because this is the process that the path itself it's offering in order for us to realize what we really are. And it is true that there are different saints, these giants, that are following only one, that by following one of these limbs, they have realized the self. But as we're going to find in the book, the 8 steps are prior to Atma Nivedana are going to represent a preparation for the last step that will be this total surrender of what we are. So I would like us to read what says about Atma Nivedana in the book. And it says, Atma Nivedana means the surrender of oneself to God. It means offering the Lord all that we believe ourselves to be and possess. Surrender is the height of the devotional process. The other 8 limbs are only intended to create the basis and foundation for surrender. If we explore more in regards to this term, Atma Nivedana is a Sanskrit word that can be translated also as surrender of self or surrender of the soul. Atma means self or soul, and Nivedana means surrender or offering. So in the Sanatana Dharma, in the Hindu spiritual tradition, Atma Nivedana is going to refer to the practice of offering all that one is, or I will say what we believe we are, and all that we have to the divinity. We are surrendering the ego, our worldly attachments, and we are recognizing that everything is a manifestation of the Supreme Being. So it is a form of total surrender and trust in the divine guidance. And we could also say that the surrender that we speak, it's a synonymous of enlightenment. It's to die as an ego and to be reborn to what we really are, is to realize the self, to discover what we are we can say, pursuing when we are following this path of the Kundalini yoga, the divinity. We should not confuse the surrender and even the renunciation that we talk about in our classes of the Swadhisthana chakra with giving up. It is very different to succumb to something than from having different options to choose to surrender to the divine. I can take different directions in my life, but from the authority that I have to decide, I choose to surrender what I am to God, as we just read in these sentences, what I believe I am or possess. It is also explained in this chapter of the book how the grace will be proportional to our surrender on the path to the divine. So I go from having my possessions to being a possession of the divine, of this king, and therefore everything that belongs to the owner of the universe is going to also belong to me. So we go from moving in our worries, anxieties about what may happen, fear for what I cannot fulfill, to have a complete confidence in existence. So the greater my surrender, the greater the care that life will have for me. Although we speak of a process of 9 members or stages, let us know that this surrender really happens in a moment. So the previous stages consist of a preparation that make that leap or jump that we have often heard about to perceive life from another place. We stop living from this contracted and limited ego to be part of the absolute, of the universal. The sequence begins with tolerance, continues with acceptance, and culminates in Shraddha or faith. Only beings of unconditional acceptance who trust existence are capable of surrendering to God. Advaita Vedanta, Being the Self, page 196 by Prabhuji. I just brought this paragraph because it's showing us how we're speaking about a sequence, a process. We're speaking about final stages of something. As I mentioned earlier, even though what we're actually speaking happens in a second, in a moment, it's a jump, we do have previous stages that are giving us the foundation, the conditions in order for us to actually, for this jump to actually happen. It's not someone that will do the jump, but there's going to be certain revelation of this understanding, of this realization that we are actually part of the whole manifestation. We are not separate from everything that is happening here. So to continue deepening into this specific subject, which is the surrender, I would like us to explore also a lecture of Prabhuji that is called Surrender. That's the central topic of this specific lecture. So he begins with the very famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita, the Sarvadharmam Parityajam Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tuam Sarvapapevyo Mukshishami Mashushaha. This is the verse from the chapter 18. This is the verse number 66 of the Bhagavad Gita, 1866. So the verse says, renounce all types of religions and surrender only to me. Fear not, I shall liberate you from all sinful reactions. So he's telling us how we need to, as the same way we appreciated with Atma-nivedana, we are taking a verse from the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So again, we are speaking about conclusions, as I just mentioned. So it is so important to understand the subject of surrender, since it is part of our retroprogressive process. And many times, because of our poor understanding of this surrender, this can be confused with exploitation. So we saw earlier how this center is related to the control we exert on others. So now we are in front of this surrender that can lead to exploit people or feel exploited. And this can actually be avoided when we understand what surrender really is. And that is why Swadhyaya is primordial in this path, to study the scriptures and have a foundation of what we're dealing with. Prabhuji is always emphasizing the importance of the study, the importance of learning more than studying. He speaks frequently about Brahma Vidya, about Yoga Vidya. I cannot remember a day where he's not mentioning and noting the importance of all this learning process in the path. So for those of us who are walking this path, it is very fundamental to know who is a guru, what is a disciple, what is discipleship based on. And in this way, we cannot be deceived or manipulated. If there is someone that is interested in these specific topics of the master-disciple relationship, which, as I mentioned, and I will continue to mention, are basic, they are a foundation for our path. Like, these are the first questions that a seeker is asking itself. There are so many books and so many scriptures that are dealing with these subjects. There is a course of the master-disciple relationship that you can also go in case you want to deepen into the topic. During the conference, Prabhuji is inviting us on what I will call a journey, an adventure, or even an excursion, where we explore essential terms and concepts in order to really understand the central topic, which is surrender, and it's the subject that we are exploring also in greater depths in this first class on the Maṇipūra-cakra. We said that our true power consists in our surrender to the divine. Let's see if I remember. True power is surrender to the supreme power. This is where our true power dwells, in surrender to the supreme power. So during the lecture, beginning by analyzing what is a possession as opposed to a loan, how our conditioning influences the way we see reality, how we project and impose our mental content on what happens. He is also explaining terms such as adhyasa, and briefly, adhyasa is a Sanskrit term that refers to the superimposition or erroneous projection of one reality onto another. So this is basically a cognitive error that occurs when we mistake the true nature of one thing for something else that resembles it. In the Vedanta philosophy, the term adhyasa is used to explain how ignorance can lead us to confusion between body and soul, or self and objects in the external world. And this overlapping or confusion can be cause of much suffering and pain, as we are mistakenly identifying ourselves with different things that we are not, and we become attached to them. I just want to mention here this very famous example of the rope and the snake, for whoever is familiar to it, when we confuse the rope with the snake and we actually get the fear, but it was only a superimposition. It was something that we projected, like it was not an actual snake, even though the fear that we felt and everything that happened to us was real. There was no snake. So this was just to bring an example that we are going to find that a lot in the books and in different lectures also of Prabhuji, and it's explaining more depths for whoever is interested. In the book Advaita Vedanta, you can find more of it. I just wanted to bring it very briefly so you can understand more about this adhyasa, and we're going to continue speaking about adhyasa. So he finalizes by explaining how this imposition is influencing our lives, and he's going to end by explaining what is it that we can actually give or surrender to our guru. So from all this exciting adventure, I would like us to concentrate on understanding what it is that we can give away. What is this that we can give? And to discriminate what we could call our possession. So we have to understand the difference between a loan and a possession. The only thing that we can actually give away is what belongs to us, something that I call a possession. But something that we have for a limited time and we have to give back, it's a loan. And here comes this term that we just discussed, adhyasa, or imposition. How we label different things as ours: my house, my husband, my daughter, my book. But they are not really ours. It is product of adhyasa. The body is not really mine. At some point, I have to give it back. And different powers, like the power to know, the power to do, the power to desire, all this is given. We did not create it. Then, if not even the body of the capacity to know or to do belongs to us, how can I entrust it to the divine? How can I give it to my guru? This is what Prabhuji is telling us in this lecture. And if all this is given, where is the giver? And here he explains the concept of Vedanta of the efficient cause and the material cause. And he's taking the example of a table. The carpenter of the table will be the efficient cause. He was the one who made it, and also can be separated from the table. And then we have the wood, which will be the material cause, from which the table cannot be separated. If we remove the wood, the table ceases to exist. So it happens with the source of this cosmic manifestation. He's telling us sarva karana karana, the first cause of all causes, that will also have to be divided in two, as we just explained with the table. So if we transfer what we explain about the table to the source of this manifestation, then the efficient cause is the creator, Brahman, Ishvara, the consciousness, God. And as it is the only thing that exists, and then it's also the material cause. So this world is divinity. We can read what we find on this subject in the book Advaita Vedanta, and it says, according to the Upanishadic revelation, Brahman existed in the beginning and then created the universe out of itself. Brahman pervades the universe. There is no second principle that provides materials for creation. Creation comes from Brahman like a web emanates from a spider, or like the sparks that fly from fire. Brahman is both the material and the efficient cause of the universe. It is the essence of everything. Everything depends on it. Brahman is the origin, the end, and the maintenance of all this universe. One should therefore quietly meditate on Brahman. And this last verse, we find it in the Chandogya Upanishad 3:14:1. For the ones that didn't see the Advaita Vedanta book, here it is. As you saw, the topics of the cause of the universe, it's explained in depth, very precise in this book. So for whoever is interested in deepening their understanding in this topic, it's very recommended to get this book or to go to the classes that we're offering. Also, there is a course of this specific book. And to continue with what we find in the lecture, then if nothing is mine, not even my body, what is it that I can surrender? And he tells us, realizing this is surrender. When you go to a guru, what you surrender is your fantasy, your dreams and hallucinations, your illusion of being something separate from the whole, which is what is causing us so much suffering. This is basically how Prabhuji is finalizing with this beautiful, I will call it a masterclass in regards to the topic of surrender. So as usual, I would recommend to go and watch the full lecture, as it's going to shed light and clarity into this very important topic. And for the ones that need it, I don't know if you notice, like we are only in the third center, and these are all attributes related to this center. So see how important is these foundations that we've been speaking for, this surrender, that it's something that is going to happen in a moment. It's the final stages of a long process, but we see how it's related to this power that we have. This is where our true power is, in this surrender to the supreme power, to realize that nothing is really ours, to realize that there is nothing that I possess, nothing that I can give, but what I'm actually giving is what I believe myself to be, or what I believe that I possess. We are going to finalize this class with listening to a few words of Prabhuji in regards to the surrender. And in our next class, we are going to continue getting to know and familiarizing ourselves with this third center, the Maṇipūra-cakra. We're going to learn more properties and more attributes related to it. Thank you very much for joining us today. Jai Prabhuji.
So, surrender is meditation. When you meditate, you should meditate with surrender. Because meditation is a state where you put aside your dream. You put aside every property, concept, ideas, your conclusions, whatever you think about yourself. And every meditation is a jump into the unknown. So surrender, maybe you have all kinds of ideas about what is surrender, but a real surrender is nothing else but to feel present in this moment as it is. and to feel deep in this moment in a meditative state. That is real surrender. Many can ask, why to a guru? The answer is that it's very similar. Surrender is similar to love. If somebody put you in a room and say, see, love, you will ask whom? No. You will need somebody to love. And if there is nobody, at least a dog or a cat, and it's not a cat, a flower, something. And that something maybe will be only an excuse for your love. It's like people who hate, They are angry with you, but if you will not be there, they will be angry with somebody else. And if nobody will be there, they will be angry with themselves. Same thing with love. The other is an excuse. The love come out, is expressed, and the other is there, so feel your love. Same thing with the surrender. You need somebody. You need somebody to whom surrender. But if what you put at the end, at the lotus feet of the Guru, is nothing else but your fantasies, your illusions, your hallucinations of mind, your dreams, your private reality, in fact, nothing happens to the Guru. You don't receive much. But he is there as an excuse for your surrender, to make easy. When you surrender to Guru, you surrender to God. When you surrender to God, you surrender to existence, to life. But the important thing, never forget, the important thing is the surrender. This is the important thing. Only in me. Yes. When Krishna say me, he don't say the body, he don't say the name. Krishna know himself. The self. Surrender to it. And the Guru is the maximum expression of it. Surrender to it. Found the maximum expression of it. And I will tell you more than that. We say when the disciple is ready, the Guru appears. We understand that when the disciple is not ready, even the Guru appears, nothing happens. Impossible. But when the disciple is ready, even the Guru doesn't appear, everything can happen.